On the evening of August 12th, 2007, in Orlando, Florida, 22-year-old Amanda Harris parked her car outside the restaurant where she worked. Within minutes, surveillance cameras captured her walking toward a coworker's vehicle, and she was never seen leaving it. Her own car was later discovered unlocked, her phone and purse untouched inside, and one of the front tires deliberately slashed. By the next morning, Amanda had vanished without a trace, leaving her family desperate and her community gripped by fear. For years, her case would grow cold, until an unexpected discovery buried in the mud of a rural lake forced investigators to reopen everything, pointing to a far darker truth than anyone imagined. Before we begin this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel, follow along, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest true crime documentaries. Orlando, Florida, 2007. The summer sun was just beginning to dip behind a row of palm trees, casting long shadows across the quiet Harris household. In a modest brick home nestled on the edge of a typical suburban neighborhood, Amanda Harris prepared for what should have been an ordinary Sunday night. The Harris home, one of those places where the grass was never quite perfect, but always green enough, buzzed with the kind of gentle, everyday chaos that marked the start of a new week. Amanda, 22, was upstairs in her small bedroom, packing her work uniform into a canvas tote bag. Her favorite playlist drifted through the air from the old white iPod docked on her desk, painting the room with memories of better times: road trips, art class, and laughter with friends. Posters of impressionist paintings and hand-sketched canvases lined her walls, remnants of her passion for art and her long-standing dream of becoming an art teacher. Beneath the surface, though, that night's routine felt heavier, the air charged with an anxiety she couldn't quite name. Downstairs, her parents, Mark and Linda Harris, were arguing quietly about bills and a leaky kitchen faucet. Her dad, still in dusty construction boots, muttered to himself as he scanned a pile of invoices, while her mom, a high school teacher, juggled lesson plans and laundry. Amanda's younger brother was in the living room, sprawled on the floor with a video game controller in hand, lost in a pixelated world. Amanda paused in front of the mirror. Her reflection stared back, a young woman with sun-bright hair, blue eyes flecked with gold, and an easy, inviting smile. She slipped on her worn sneakers, shrugged into her faded hoodie, and checked her phone. 4:42 p.m. There were no missed calls, no new messages. She hesitated, as if waiting for a sign, then shrugged it off. Just another night, she told herself. She padded downstairs, bag slung over one shoulder, iPod still humming a cheerful tune. Her mother called after her, "Don't be late, Amanda." But Amanda barely heard it, lost in the haze of her thoughts. She paused at the front door, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to see something out of place. But the house was the same as always, cluttered, loving, imperfect, safe. Outside, the neighborhood was alive with the sounds of summer. Sprinklers clicked across yellowed lawns. A dog barked in the distance. Amanda walked to her old silver sedan, its paint sun-faded and chipped at the edges. She tossed her bag in the back seat and slid into the driver's seat, feeling a flutter of nerves in her stomach. As she started the engine, her phone buzzed. A message from Brian Keller. Just 3 words. "See you soon." Amanda's fingers hovered over the reply button. Then she tossed the phone into her bag and pulled away from the curb. The drive to the restaurant was short, but the city seemed to stretch endlessly as she navigated the familiar route. Orlando in 2007 was a city in transition, new developments pushing against the edges of old neighborhoods. theme park magic brushing up against everyday life. The radio played a song she used to love, and for a moment, Amanda almost sang along. She arrived at the restaurant, a family-owned spot nestled between a dry cleaner and an aging movie theater, just after 5. The parking lot was half empty, the neon open sign already buzzing in the twilight. Amanda parked in her usual spot, grabbed her tote, and made her way toward the employee entrance. She didn't notice the shadow lingering at the edge of the lot, the dark shape of a car parked beneath a flickering street lamp, engine idling. Inside, the restaurant pulsed with the usual pre-dinner energy, clatter of plates, hiss of the fryer, bursts of laughter from the servers. Amanda clocked in, exchanged a wave with Maria at the register, and ducked into the cramped staff room to change into her uniform. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Brian this time. "Need to talk." She rolled her eyes, not wanting to deal with another round of his dramatics. Still, her pulse quickened. Back in the kitchen, Brian Keller, tall, dark-haired, intense, caught her eye. He was busy at the stove, but Amanda felt his gaze like a weight pressing on her. Their relationship had always been complicated, a mix of late-night arguments and brief, stolen moments of affection. Tonight, the tension seemed thicker than ever. The shift passed in a blur of orders and small talk. Amanda moved through the motions with practiced grace, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept glancing at the clock, counting down the minutes until closing. Every so often, she caught Brian watching her, his eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. The staff buzzed around them, oblivious to the invisible line drawn in the kitchen. When her shift finally ended, Amanda grabbed her bag, changed back into her hoodie, and slipped out the back door. The parking lot was nearly empty, the only light coming from the faded street lamp overhead. As she walked toward her car, she saw Brian's car idling near the exit. He rolled down the window. Amanda hesitated, heart pounding, then approached. They exchanged tense words, too quiet to be heard over the hum of traffic. After a moment, she got into the passenger seat. The door slammed shut behind her. The night swallowed them whole. Back at the Harris home, Amanda's iPod still played quietly in her empty bedroom, a hopeful song echoing against 4 bare walls. The clock on her desk blinked past midnight. Amanda never came home, and so, on what should have been a perfectly normal night in Orlando, a cheerful young woman, full of life, full of promise, simply vanished. Who could harm someone like Amanda Harris? Amanda Harris had always been a familiar face around her Orlando neighborhood, her easy laugh and bright personality making her impossible to ignore. She grew up in a comfortable, middle-class home on the edge of the city, where old oaks arched over sun-cracked sidewalks and children's bikes leaned against chain-link fences. From the outside, the Harris family appeared perfectly ordinary, but like most families, they had their own private hopes and struggles. Her father, Mark Harris, was a sturdy, weathered man who spent his days working long hours on construction sites, coming home every evening with dust in his hair and stories of Florida's ever-changing skyline. Linda, Amanda's mother, was a public school teacher whose gentle patience had calmed more than a few rowdy classrooms. Together, Mark and Linda worked hard to provide a safe and loving home for Amanda and her younger brother, never missing a soccer game or a parent-teacher night. Amanda had inherited the best of both, her father's quiet resilience, her mother's warmth and intuition. But it was her love of art that truly set her apart. From the time she could hold a crayon, Amanda drew the world as she saw it. Vibrant, messy, full of hidden corners and unexpected beauty. Her room had always been a canvas, sketchbooks scattered on her desk, half-finished paintings leaning against the walls, the smell of acrylic lingering in the air. She dreamed, quietly but fiercely, of becoming an art teacher, of guiding young minds to see the world as she did, in splashes of color and moments of wonder. At 22, Amanda was juggling part-time college classes at the community college with her job at the downtown restaurant. She'd chosen a practical path, working hard to save money for her tuition and supplies, never losing sight of her dream. She was outgoing, easy to smile, with a way of making everyone around her feel at ease. Friends described her as the type to remember birthdays, to organize spontaneous road trips, to leave cheerful notes taped to their lockers. The staff at the restaurant often found her humming old pop songs in the kitchen, or doodling on napkins during breaks. She belonged to her community in a way that was both natural and rare. But Amanda's life wasn't without its complications. She'd fallen, almost by accident, into a relationship with Brian Keller, the restaurant's head chef, a man 4 years her senior. Their relationship was an open secret among their coworkers, a drama unfolding in whispered conversations and stolen glances across the crowded kitchen. Brian was intense, ambitious, and prone to bursts of temper that set everyone on edge. Amanda was drawn to his passion and energy, but the relationship quickly became a source of tension. Arguments flared and faded like summer thunderstorms, leaving both of them exhausted and uncertain. Sometimes, Amanda confided in her friends about the constant ups and downs, but she always shrugged off their concern. "It's nothing," she'd say, forcing a smile. "We just fight sometimes." Orlando itself was changing. By 2007, it was a city caught between identities. The glitz of tourist attractions and sprawling resorts clashed with the slower rhythms of everyday life. Local diners, family-run shops, old neighborhoods that still held traces of the past. Construction cranes cut across the horizon, and new highways carved up the map, promising progress and opportunity. But in the spaces between, the city held on to its small-town soul. Neighbors still waved from front porches, and people remembered the names of the cashiers at the grocery store. Amanda found comfort in these familiar rituals. Morning coffee runs at the corner cafe, painting en plein air at Lake Eola Park, and Friday night dinners with her family. Evenings were often spent sprawled on her bed, music playing, sketchbook in hand. She made time for her friends, whether that meant lending a shoulder to cry on or organizing impromptu movie nights in someone's garage. For Amanda, connection mattered, a lesson learned from years watching her parents stick together through hard times. At the restaurant, Amanda was known for her work ethic and her kindness. She covered shifts when others called in sick, brought homemade cookies for the staff, and remembered every regular's order by heart. But beneath her bright surface, she was often tired, stretched thin between work, school, and her volatile relationship with Brian. She tried to keep her worries to herself, never wanting to trouble her family. Sometimes, late at night, she would paint until the world faded away, her colors growing bolder as she tried to push back the shadows. The city around her was full of possibility, but also risk. Orlando's growth brought new faces, new opportunities, and new dangers lurking just out of sight. Amanda, raised to be trusting and open, sometimes felt caught between her optimism and an uneasy sense of vulnerability. She told herself she could handle anything, that nothing truly bad happened in neighborhoods like hers. Yet, as the sun set on that fateful August evening, the Harris family home felt a little emptier, the air a little heavier. In the busy restaurant kitchen, a storm brewed just beneath the surface. one Amanda had weathered before, but never with stakes this high. Amanda Harris, so full of life and light, would soon find herself at the center of a mystery that would test the strength of everyone who loved her and leave a city forever changed. August 12, 2007 began with the relentless heat of a Florida summer pressing down on Orlando. Amanda Harris moved through her day with a sense of routine. Breakfast with her mother, a call from a friend, a quick trip to the art supply store where she lingered longer than she should have, running her fingers over paintbrushes she could barely afford. By late afternoon, she was back home, readying herself for another evening shift at the restaurant. Nothing in her movements suggested that this day would be any different than 100 others before it. As 5 o'clock approached, Amanda said a distracted goodbye to her parents. She gathered her things, tote bag, phone, wallet, her keys jingling against a charm bracelet she'd worn since high school. Her iPod, now silent, remained on her desk, a tiny beacon of unfinished plans and waiting dreams. She got in her silver sedan and drove away, glancing once at the rearview mirror as the Harris home faded into the golden haze of evening. At the restaurant, the usual bustle had begun. Employees filtered in, laughter echoing in the narrow halls. Amanda arrived just after 5:20 p.m., pulling into her regular spot in the parking lot beneath the flicker of an old street lamp. A coworker, Josh, spotted her from across the lot, waving a lazy hello as she gathered her things. She smiled and waved back, then hurried inside, unaware of how those small moments would be dissected and analyzed in the weeks and months to come. But this ordinary evening unraveled quickly. Surveillance footage, later pored over by police, family, and strangers alike, captured Amanda in the parking lot, walking with a determined step. She paused, her head tilted, as she spotted Brian Keller's car idling nearby. The camera caught the two exchanging brief words, Amanda leaning toward the open window, her face partly hidden by shadows. There was tension in her posture, a sense of urgency that hinted at unfinished business or lingering anger. Moments later, Amanda opened the passenger door and slipped inside. The car doors shut with a soft thud, muffled by the hum of distant traffic. The restaurant's back entrance swung open and closed as employees hurried to finish prep work, oblivious to what was unfolding just yards away. From the surveillance feed, the next few minutes were a blur. A subtle movement inside Brian's car, a sudden jolt that made the vehicle rock as if something inside had disturbed the balance. The driver's side door cracked open, then closed again, light briefly spilling into the interior. Another door opened, then slammed. The vehicle remained unmoving, a silent witness to whatever took place within. No one saw Amanda leave Brian's car. No one remembered seeing her walk back toward the restaurant or across the parking lot. When her shift ended that night, Amanda's silver sedan was still parked in the same spot, its doors locked but not alarmed. It was only later, under the harsh glare of police spotlights, that the details would emerge. Amanda's purse lay untouched on the passenger seat. Her phone was tucked inside, screen dark, unread messages piling up. Her keys were still there, resting on top of her wallet. Oddest of all, one of the front tires had been slashed, a clean, deliberate wound that left the car crippled and Amanda, it seemed, without a way home. The hours ticked by with cruel indifference. The restaurant closed for the night, staff trickling out into the parking lot, passing Amanda's car without a second glance. At home, her parents waited, assuming Amanda had stopped for coffee or gotten caught up with friends after work. Midnight came and went. The Harris home was quiet, but the silence soon turned brittle with worry. It wasn't until the next morning, when Amanda still hadn't returned and her phone went straight to voicemail, that her mother's unease turned to panic. By noon, the Harris family had called the police, and within hours, investigators were combing the restaurant parking lot, cordoning off Amanda's car, and interviewing every employee who'd worked the previous night. News traveled fast. Friends, neighbors, and coworkers began piecing together the timeline, searching for a clue, a sign, anything to make sense of Amanda's sudden vanishing. As police examined the footage and collected statements, a chilling narrative took shape. Amanda, who had left home with plans for the future and no apparent reason to disappear, was gone. Her last known location, a place she knew well, surrounded by people she saw every day. Her car, left in plain sight, suggested that whatever happened to her had unfolded quickly and quietly, in the narrow window between daylight and darkness. In the coming days, Orlando would be swept into a storm of speculation and fear. Newspapers printed her photo. TV anchors described her as the girl who vanished without a trace. And the Harris family's porch became a gathering place for anxious neighbors and volunteers. But as the days stretched into weeks and then months, one truth became painfully clear. Amanda Harris, an ordinary young woman with an ordinary life, had slipped through the cracks of her own world, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of dread. And somewhere in the city, someone knew what happened. Someone held the secret to that silent, irreversible moment when Amanda Harris disappeared. The Harris household became a place where time seemed to slow, where each hour without Amanda stretched into an eternity. The morning after Amanda failed to come home, her mother's gentle routine collapsed. Linda Harris paced the living room with a trembling phone clutched to her chest, dialing and redialing Amanda's number. Each ring that ended in voicemail left her feeling colder. Mark Harris searched the neighborhood, his sturdy frame made fragile by fear, calling out Amanda's name along the quiet streets. Amanda's younger brother, silent and confused, clung to his mother's side, trying to be brave. By midday, word had spread far beyond the family's four walls. Orlando, for all its sprawl, was still a place where news traveled fast. Neighbors began to gather on the Harris front lawn, offering support in hushed voices, arms laden with casseroles and coffee. Flyers, hastily printed with Amanda's smiling face and a plea for help, were posted on lampposts, bus stops, and the bulletin board at the grocery store. Friends arrived in waves, some with tears in their eyes, others with determination, all with the same question. How could this happen here? The local police launched their search, treating Amanda's disappearance as an urgent priority. Patrol cars prowled the city streets, their lights reflecting off rain-soaked pavement as officers interviewed restaurant staff, combed through parking lots, and knocked on doors from downtown to the city's quiet outskirts. Detectives set up a temporary command post at the Harris home, their radios crackling, notepads filling with names and timelines. The first television crew appeared by dusk, camera lights harsh in the golden evening, eager for details that the family could not provide. For the Harris family, each new face at their door was both a comfort and a reminder of their desperation. Linda moved through her house like a ghost, pausing in Amanda's room to stare at the scattered art supplies and the bed left unmade. She smoothed Amanda's pillow, her hand lingering, as if she could will her daughter's return. Mark tried to keep busy, organizing search parties, retracing Amanda's route from home to work, hoping for some overlooked detail that would lead to answers. The first night was the hardest. Friends gathered outside the Harris home, lighting candles in a fragile vigil that cast trembling shadows on the porch. The flicker of flame seemed so small against the darkness settling over the neighborhood, but it was something, a symbol of hope, a promise that Amanda would not be forgotten. One neighbor offered a prayer, her words breaking in the warm night air. Others just stood in silence, the gravity of Amanda's absence pressing on them all. The search expanded. The local high school where Linda taught became a hub for volunteers. Students who knew Amanda only as a substitute teacher's daughter joined classmates in stapling flyers to telephone poles and organizing carpools for search teams. Amanda's friends mapped out nearby parks and wooded areas, determined to leave no stone unturned. Their hope was raw and relentless, fueled by stories of missing people who had returned after days or weeks, stories that seemed to grow more distant as time passed. The media coverage deepened the sense of unease that settled over Orlando. Every news anchor's somber voice and every headline featuring Amanda's photograph served as a grim reminder that something terrible had happened in their own backyard. Theories spread quickly. Whispers of a stranger lurking in the shadows, of crimes too awful to name, of secrets hidden behind familiar faces. Parents tightened their grip on their children's hands. Restaurant staff became wary, watching each other with a new suspicion. The police, under increasing pressure, released what little information they had. Amanda's car had been found at the restaurant, one tire slashed, her belongings untouched inside. Surveillance footage showed her speaking with Brian Keller, the head chef, just before she disappeared, but nothing more. No sign of struggle, no trail to follow. Just a young woman, gone in the space of a heartbeat. For the Harris family, hope and dread fought a silent battle in every quiet moment. Linda spent sleepless nights in Amanda's room, holding her daughter's favorite sweater close. Mark walked the streets after dark, searching faces in every passing car, haunted by the thought that someone out there knew the truth. They clung to each other, refusing to let grief drown out hope. The community's response grew into something almost ritualistic. Each evening, more candles joined the vigil, their soft light a fragile bulwark against despair. Volunteers brought food, blankets, words of comfort. Amanda's absence became a part of the city's rhythm, an ache that threaded through every conversation, every news update, every prayer. The porch, aglow with candles, stood as a beacon, not just for Amanda's family, but for everyone who feared the darkness was growing closer. And still, beneath every act of kindness, every whispered prayer, the question lingered. Was there a predator lurking among them? Was Amanda a victim of random violence, or was the danger closer to home than anyone dared imagine? In the warm Florida night, the candles burned on, small flames against a gathering storm, the Harris family refusing to let hope die. The days after Amanda's disappearance bled together in a haze of uncertainty, each one marked by unanswered calls and restless nights. The Harris family clung to the hope that she would walk through the door at any moment, but reality was tightening its grip. The Orlando Police Department pressed forward, working against a tide of rumors and a growing sense of dread that threatened to engulf the city. Detectives started by meticulously reconstructing Amanda's last known movements. The evidence was chilling in its clarity and silence. Amanda had parked her silver sedan at the restaurant's lot around 5:20 p.m. on August 12th, just as the sun was dipping behind the rooftops. Surveillance footage became their touchstone, grainy but damning. The tape captured Amanda crossing the parking lot, her step purposeful, her face tense as she made her way toward Brian Keller's car. The rest of the staff had been busy with their own routines, not realizing the significance of Amanda's detour. Brian's car sat idling in a corner, its windows tinted just enough to obscure the faces inside. The camera showed Amanda leaning in through the passenger window, exchanging words with Brian, though whatever was said was swallowed by the hum of traffic and the rumble of the restaurant's back door. After a tense moment, Amanda slipped into the car. The doors closed, and the vehicle rocked slightly, a movement that, in retrospect, seemed loaded with ominous meaning. The next sequence was brief but disturbing. Brian's car doors opened and closed, quick flashes of motion suggesting a struggle or, at the very least, an emotional confrontation. After several minutes, Brian emerged alone. His movements were hurried, almost frantic. He walked toward Amanda's car, glancing over his shoulder as if checking for witnesses. Then he did something that would become central to the investigation. He rifled through Amanda's vehicle, opening the driver's side door, his hands searching the interior with obvious purpose. Detectives would later describe his actions as searching for something, or perhaps trying to cover his tracks. Brian's final act was unmistakable. He knelt beside Amanda's front tire, and with a practiced motion, slashed it clean through. The knife's glint was visible only for an instant. The tire deflated with a sigh, leaving Amanda's car crippled. Brian walked away, disappearing from the camera's view, leaving behind an unsettling tableau. Amanda's empty car, her purse and phone undisturbed, her future upended. By the time police interviewed Brian Keller, the story he offered was slippery and unconvincing. He admitted to arguing with Amanda in his car. "Just a small argument," he said, shrugging off the concern of the detectives. According to Brian, Amanda had gotten upset and walked away into the night, refusing his offer to drive her home. He claimed he stayed behind, only returning to his own apartment hours later, alone. There was no explanation for why he'd rifled through her car or why he'd slashed her tire. When pressed, he grew defensive, his hands trembling as he fumbled for words. "I didn't hurt her," he insisted, but the detectives sensed a current of fear beneath his bravado. For Amanda's family, Brian's involvement was a knife twist in a wound already too deep. Linda Harris recalled the arguments Amanda had with Brian, the way Amanda's mood would sour after his late-night calls. Mark Harris remembered how Brian had always seemed just a bit too intense, too controlling, his smiles never reaching his eyes. The restaurant staff confirmed the tension, describing a relationship fraught with jealousy, accusations, and whispered threats behind swinging kitchen doors. As the investigation continued, the police combed through Brian's alibi. They visited his apartment, where dishes sat unwashed in the sink and laundry was strewn across the floor. His story, full of small inconsistencies, unraveled under scrutiny. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices late that night, but none could say for certain whether Amanda had ever left the restaurant parking lot. The police searched Amanda's car for fingerprints, fibers, any sign of a struggle, but the scene was almost too clean. No blood, no torn fabric, no evidence that could definitively tie Brian or anyone else to a crime. Only the slashed tire, the rifled glove compartment, and the cold, empty parking lot. Public suspicion began to grow. News outlets zeroed in on Brian's history, a string of short-lived relationships, a tendency toward temper. His face, once just another in the kitchen's daily churn, became the subject of speculation and judgment. Neighbors whispered, coworkers kept their distance, and Brian, isolated by a storm of suspicion, grew more erratic. He called the Harris home twice in the days after Amanda vanished, his voice hoarse, asking if anyone had heard from her. Linda hung up both times, unable to listen to his pleading. Despite mounting circumstantial evidence, the case stalled. With no body, no murder weapon, and no confession, all the police had were shadows and unanswered questions. The surveillance footage played again and again. Each frame burned into the memory of the Harris family and the city that now watched with bated breath. Amanda Harris had become a mystery, one marked by silence, suspicion, and the nagging fear that the truth was slipping away with every passing day. As the days melted into weeks and the weeks into months, the city's initial shock gave way to a grinding, weary silence. The media that once camped on the Harris lawn gradually drifted away, lured by newer stories and fresher tragedies. News vans disappeared, and the porch returned to its quiet emptiness, the scent of melted candle wax and wilted flowers lingering as a gentle reminder of hope's fragility. For the Harris family, the pain never faded. Amanda's absence became a haunting, an echo reverberating through every corner of their lives. Linda clung to her daughter's memory with a mother's stubborn love, her eyes often fixed on Amanda's old bedroom door, as if willing it to swing open. She left the room unchanged, sketchbooks fanned across the desk, the old iPod still docked, a sweater draped over the chair. Sometimes Linda sat on the bed and pressed her face into Amanda's pillow, breathing in traces of the life that once filled their home. Mark Harris was changed too. His broad shoulders slumped with invisible weight, and he moved through his days in slow motion, work boots scraping across construction sites as if sleepwalking. At night, he patrolled the block, flashlight in hand, searching for some overlooked clue, some missed piece of the puzzle. He became a regular at the local police station, pressing detectives for updates, refusing to let his daughter's name fade from their files. Amanda's younger brother, once so vibrant, grew quiet and watchful. He avoided Amanda's room, avoided the reminders of her laughter. The family tiptoed around their grief, conversations looping endlessly over the same small details. Her favorite songs, the last thing she said, the day she disappeared. Time lost its meaning. The house felt suspended, caught between hope and mourning. Outside their home, Amanda's memory was kept alive through ritual. On her birthday each year, the Harris family gathered on the porch beneath the soft glow of string lights. Linda placed fresh flowers in a mason jar and lit a single candle, its flame shivering in the evening breeze. Friends and neighbors joined, heads bowed, voices low. They spoke of Amanda's art, her dreams, her kindness, a chorus of memories that grew softer with each passing year. The candle, a lone sentinel in the night, became both a protest against forgetting and a symbol of love refusing to die. A single candle fighting against the darkness of forgetting, one neighbor whispered, a phrase that stuck in the community's collective heart. The police investigation, once relentless, slowed to a crawl. New leads fizzled out. Rumors came and went, sightings that led nowhere, whispers of confessions that turned out to be nothing but cruel pranks. Detectives changed shifts, case files collected dust, and Amanda's name was quietly added to the department's growing stack of cold cases. Her photograph, taped to a wall in the detective's office, watched over the room like a silent witness to justice delayed. Every so often, the Harris family received a call from a stranger claiming to have seen Amanda, a glimpse at a bus stop, a girl who looked like her in a distant city. Each time, hope surged, only to dissolve into disappointment. The family learned to steel themselves against these false alarms, but the pain was always fresh, always raw. Orlando itself kept moving. New families moved into the neighborhood. The restaurant where Amanda once worked changed hands, its sign replaced and its kitchen filled with new faces. But some things remained untouched. The lamppost at the corner where Amanda's flyer was taped, the faded photograph still clinging to the pole after every rainstorm, the memory of a young woman whose absence had left a hollow in the city's heart. The Harris family struggled to hold on to the meaning of Amanda's life, determined that she would not become just another missing person, just another cold statistic. Linda joined a support group for families of the missing, her pain reflected in the eyes of others who understood. Mark volunteered for search and rescue missions, determined to repay the kindness that had once flooded their doorstep. Amanda's brother began painting, filling canvas after canvas with abstract swirls of color, a silent tribute to the sister he missed. Seasons changed. Birthdays and holidays came and went, marked by empty chairs and heavy silences. But every August, as the anniversary of Amanda's disappearance approached, the community paused. Friends old and new came together on the Harris porch, the flicker of candlelight painting their faces with grief and determination. Each flame was a vow. Amanda would not be forgotten, not as long as those who loved her endured. The world was not kind to those who waited. Hope became a stubborn ember, refusing to go out, no matter how cold the night. And in that quiet suburb of Orlando, one family kept a vigil year after year, their porch a beacon for the lost, their hearts still searching for the light of Amanda's return. 4 years passed, marked by seasons of hope and despair that ebbed and flowed in the Harris home like the tides. Orlando itself moved on, the cityscape morphing with new developments and endless construction. But for Amanda's family, time seemed to stand still. The annual candlelight vigils on the Harris porch grew smaller. The faces changed, but Amanda's memory flickered on, a fragile light in the dark. Then, in the relentless heat of the summer of 2011, something changed. Central Florida was gripped by a drought more severe than any in recent memory. Lawns withered, ponds shrank, and the water level of every lake in the region receded, bearing muddy banks and long-forgotten debris. It was during one of those sweltering afternoons, just outside the city limits, that a fisherman wandered along the cracked shoreline of a rural lake, his tackle box in hand, his dog darting in and out of the weeds. The fisherman's usual spot, once hidden beneath waist-deep water, was now exposed, damp mud streaked with tire tracks and the odd glint of litter. He moved slowly, his boots squelching as he poked at the soft earth. It was then that he noticed a piece of rusted metal jutting from the mud, oddly out of place among the driftwood and broken bottles. The shape was unmistakable, the rim of a steel drum, its faded blue paint pocked with rust. Something about the way it sat, half submerged and stubbornly anchored, made the fisherman uneasy. He called the sheriff's office, his voice rough with curiosity and something else, a suspicion that what he'd found was more than just another relic tossed away and forgotten. Deputies arrived within the hour, their boots sinking in the same muck. It took a winch and a lot of sweat to pull the drum from its resting place. When it finally broke free, the smell was foul and heavy, thick with years of decay and secrets. The deputies pried the lid off slowly, their faces set in grim expectation. Inside, beneath a layer of silt and rotted cloth, They found remnants of clothing, a tangled mess that no rain or sun could ever wash clean. There was a bracelet, delicate and silver, its tiny heart charm barely tarnished. They bagged everything, sealed the drum, and drove it straight to the county coroner's office. Word spread quickly, first among law enforcement, then in whispers through the city. By the time detectives reached the Harris home, the news vans were already assembling down the block. Linda opened the door to the officers, her heart lurching at the somber set of their faces. They showed her the bracelet first, careful not to reveal too much at once. Linda took one look and collapsed into Mark's arms, her hands clutching the charm that had belonged to Amanda since she was 16. For days, Orlando was a city holding its breath. Forensic teams pored over every scrap of fabric, every trace of evidence that the drum might yield. The clothing, though damaged by years in the mud, matched the uniform Amanda had been wearing the night she vanished. The bracelet left no doubt. The Harris family confirmed it had been a birthday gift, the inscription on the heart charm still faintly visible. A+M. Love always. There were no remains, only these small, brutal fragments of a life interrupted. The news crashed over Amanda's family like a wave, submerging them in grief and relief and rage all at once. For so long, they had lived in the shadow of the unknown, clinging to the hope that Amanda was still out there somewhere, waiting to come home. Now, hope had been replaced by a kind of closure, cold and sharp, but closure all the same. Linda wept for the years lost, for the birthdays and holidays Amanda had missed, for the future that had been stolen from her daughter. Mark found himself gripped by an anger he could not name. Desperate to know who had done this, who had taken Amanda from them and hidden her in the mud and darkness. The discovery of the drum sent shockwaves through the community. Old fears returned, sharper and fresher than before. The restaurant where Amanda had worked became a site of pilgrimage, its staff and patrons leaving flowers and messages beneath her faded photograph. At the Harris home, neighbors gathered again, candles in hand, but this time the vigil felt different, more final, more somber, as if the city itself was mourning. Detectives reopened the case with new determination. The drum, the bracelet, the scraps of fabric, each became a piece of evidence, a map that might lead, finally, to justice. Amanda's name was back on the front page, her story retold in news segments and community forums. The Harris family braced themselves for the next wave of investigation, their sorrow mingled with resolve. After 4 long years, a secret had surfaced from the depths. A case thought to be forgotten was suddenly alive again, and Amanda Harris's story, long buried, demanded an ending. The discovery of Amanda's bracelet and clothing shattered the uneasy peace that had settled over Orlando. In the wake of the news, old wounds reopened for the Harris family, but now, instead of paralyzing grief, there was a desperate hunger for answers. Detectives, once forced to shelve Amanda's case, now worked around the clock, driven by the tangible evidence that had surfaced after years lost in darkness. All eyes turned once again to Brian Keller, the head chef who had tried to return to a semblance of normalcy after the initial investigation faded, now found his world closing in. Detectives re-examined every detail of his story. They pored over phone records, GPS data, and old interviews with the cold precision of people who had waited too long to bring Amanda home. With advances in technology and a renewed sense of purpose, the gaps in Brian's original story became glaring. It was a single cell tower ping, almost forgotten in the mountains of old evidence that breathed new life into the investigation. On the night Amanda vanished, Brian's phone had connected briefly to a cell tower near the same rural lake where the steel drum was found. He had never mentioned going near the area that night. His original statement said he'd gone straight home after their argument. But the phone records told a different story. He'd lingered in the vicinity of the lake for nearly an hour, during the exact window of time when Amanda disappeared from the restaurant parking lot. Brian was brought in for questioning once again. The air in the interrogation room was heavier this time. No longer the awkward, uncertain tension of the early investigation, but the palpable pressure of suspicion closing in. Brian repeated his story, insisting he had argued with Amanda, but had watched her walk away into the night, refusing his help. But this time, detectives confronted him with the evidence: the cell phone record, the location of the drum, the fact that his car had been spotted by a state trooper parked on a rural back road only miles from the lake, its headlights off, shortly before midnight. Under the weight of mounting evidence and relentless questioning, Brian's bravado began to crack. He admitted at last that he had argued with Amanda that night, that their relationship had been more volatile than he'd let on, and that he had driven near the lake after leaving the restaurant. He insisted, however, that he had only gone for a drive to clear his head, that Amanda had stormed off on her own. The truth, it seemed, was still slippery in Brian's hands. But the investigators' resolve only hardened. They dug deeper, expanding their search for answers. In the mud surrounding the spot where the steel drum had been found, forensics uncovered a critical clue: a distinct set of tire tracks. They were fresh enough, preserved by the drought, that their pattern was easily identified. And when compared to the tires on Brian's car from that time, the match was not exact. The tracks were wider, from a different make and model altogether. This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. Had Brian acted alone, or was someone else involved? If another vehicle was present at the lake that night, who had been behind the wheel? Was Brian weaving a cover-up, trying to deflect suspicion by painting himself as merely unlucky? Or had someone else helped him that night? Or perhaps taken matters into their own hands? The investigation widened. Detectives traced the movements of every person connected to Amanda: coworkers, old friends, even distant acquaintances whose names had never before come up. They reviewed years of old tips and rumors, searching for anything that might point to a second suspect. The restaurant's staff was re-interviewed, and even after all those years, some memories surfaced. A dishwasher who remembered seeing a dark pickup truck in the parking lot that night, headlights off, parked at the edge of the lot near Brian's car. Amanda's family watched as the storm of attention swirled again, hope and dread warring in their hearts. Linda kept a journal of every new development, her handwriting sharp with anger and anticipation. Mark, unable to sit idle, organized community meetings, urging neighbors not to let Amanda's case be buried again. The candlelight vigils became protests, signs demanding justice, news cameras rolling as people gathered outside the courthouse, their faces lit by the flames and the unwavering determination to bring Amanda's killer or killers to light. Forensic analysts returned to the evidence from the steel drum. New techniques, unavailable at the time of Amanda's disappearance, were employed. Trace elements, fibers, and even tiny fragments of DNA were examined with obsessive detail, every possibility explored. The Harris family braced for each call from the detectives, torn between fearing the worst and longing for the truth, no matter how dark. In the end, the evidence painted a chilling picture, but stopped just short of delivering closure. Brian remained the primary suspect, his denials growing weaker by the day. But with the presence of a second vehicle and no direct link to anyone else, the possibility of an accomplice, or another perpetrator entirely, hung over the case like a storm cloud. If not Brian alone, then who else had helped to hide Amanda's fate all those years ago? The question echoed in every corner of Orlando, in every heart that still remembered Amanda Harris, refusing to let her story end without justice. The city of Orlando, already haunted by Amanda's case, found itself grappling with a deeper, more unsettling truth. The lines between fiction and reality had blurred. The details of Amanda Harris's disappearance, her youth and optimism cut short, echoed the headlines that had shocked another Florida city not so long ago. For Amanda's family, for every family who had watched a loved one vanish, this story was more than local tragedy. It was a reminder that beneath the surface of every ordinary community, danger sometimes wore the most familiar faces. As Amanda's case gained renewed attention, journalists and true crime enthusiasts drew comparisons to a case that had seized the nation's interest just a few years earlier. In Jacksonville, Florida, in the summer of 2017, Savannah Gold, a bright, 21-year-old woman, disappeared after clocking in for her restaurant shift. Savannah was known for her kindness, her infectious laughter, and her dreams of a future in the arts. Like Amanda, she was a beloved daughter and friend, a young woman who had so much still ahead. The parallels between Amanda's fictional ordeal and Savannah's real-life tragedy were impossible to ignore. Savannah's case had begun with the same sense of disbelief, a daughter who always called home, suddenly unreachable. Her car left behind in the restaurant parking lot, with her purse, phone, and keys untouched. The first hours were frantic. Her family scoured the city, police retraced every step, and the media descended. But the details that followed revealed a story both chilling and heartbreakingly familiar. Savannah's last known interaction was with a coworker, Lee Rodart, who managed the kitchen at her restaurant. Theirs was a complicated relationship, marked by secrecy and tension, by moments of affection soured by mistrust. On the evening she vanished, security cameras recorded Savannah walking to Lee's car. There was a brief exchange, a flash of movement. Then, like Amanda, she simply disappeared. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on Lee. His story changed with every retelling, his explanations never quite matching the evidence. When police pressed him, the mask slipped. Lee confessed to killing Savannah, describing a confrontation that turned violent in the shadowed lot. He admitted to placing her body in the trunk of his car and later hiding her remains in a pond outside the city. The details were cold and callous, the act deliberate and methodical. Savannah's family, torn between hope and horror, was forced to grieve a life taken not by random fate, but by the hand of someone she had trusted. The case made headlines far beyond Jacksonville. It was not just the brutality of the crime that shocked people, but the ordinariness of its setting. A busy restaurant, a familiar coworker, a dispute that escalated while others bustled just a few steps away. The community gathered in vigils, lighting candles for Savannah as they had for Amanda, refusing to let the victims be reduced to mere statistics. For Savannah's family, the pain was matched only by their resolve to see justice done. Lee Rodart's conviction brought a measure of closure, a 40-year sentence that could never replace the life he had stolen, but at least held him accountable. Savannah's story became a cautionary tale, her smile immortalized in photographs, her legacy woven into the community's resolve to protect its daughters. For Amanda Harris's family, the fictional reflection of this real, enduring grief, the resurgence of their daughter's case forced them to confront how quickly a life can be shattered by violence. Linda found herself reading every news article about Savannah, aching for a mother she'd never met but understood too well. Mark studied the details of Rodart's confession, looking for patterns, for meaning, as if the answer to Amanda's disappearance might be hidden somewhere between the lines. In support groups and online forums, families like the Harrises and Golds found comfort in each other, united by loss and the stubborn need for remembrance. Amanda's vigil candles joined Savannah's, their flames intertwined by tragedy and hope. The fictionalization of Amanda's case was more than storytelling. It was a way of honoring the real women whose voices had been silenced. It was a warning to every listener, every parent, every friend. Evil is not always a stranger. Sometimes it is the person you see every day, the one who knows how to twist the truth and hide in plain sight. The stories served as a collective cry, a demand for vigilance, for empathy, for justice that endures long after the headlines fade. As the city of Orlando faced the final chapters of Amanda's story, the lessons of Savannah's real-life tragedy remained. Justice was possible, but it required community, memory, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. For every Amanda, for every Savannah, the promise remained. You will not be forgotten. Your story, in life and in loss, matters. And so, as the sun set over the Harris home, and the candles burned on through the night, one story became many, a tapestry of heartbreak and hope, forever stitched into the fabric of those who remember. As the years passed, Amanda Harris's name became more than a headline, more than a haunting memory in a quiet Florida suburb. For her family, her absence would always be an open wound, but their love transformed into something powerful, a determination that Amanda's story would not simply slip into silence. Her memory, her smile, her kindness, her creativity became a force that inspired others to act, to remember, and to protect. At the Harris home, rituals endured. Each August, Linda and Mark prepared the porch for Amanda's birthday vigil, stringing up lights and placing candles beside Amanda's favorite sketches, protected in simple frames. Neighbors arrived with flowers and cards, children clinging to their parents' hands. The atmosphere soft and reverent as the sun dipped low. Even after so many years, the porch filled with the gentle hum of conversation, friends and strangers alike gathering not just to mourn, but to celebrate the life Amanda had lived. There was laughter in the stories they told. They remembered Amanda's stubborn streak, her habit of singing off-key, the way she would offer a sketch to anyone who looked down or lonely. They shared her artwork, bright scenes of Florida's lakes and parks, portraits of family and friends, each brushstroke capturing her hope for the world. For a few hours each year, Amanda's spirit filled the air, living and vivid, and the Harris home became a sanctuary not only for grief, but for love. But grief, as always, was an undercurrent. Linda often found herself tracing the edges of Amanda's old paintings, her fingers lingering on her daughter's signature, eyes filling with tears that never seemed to fully dry. Mark, who had once searched the city's empty lots and wooded trails, now found solace in building, constructing benches for parks, planting trees in Amanda's honor, giving back to a community that had once carried his family through their darkest days. Amanda's brother, now grown, became an artist in his own right. He painted with a fervor that bordered on obsession, each canvas a tribute, each exhibition a way to keep Amanda close. His work spoke of loss, but also of resilience, of a belief that beauty and pain could coexist. Through his art, he told Amanda's story to those who would listen, and sometimes to those who didn't even realize they needed to hear it. The community, shaped by Amanda's disappearance, became more vigilant, more caring. Neighborhood watch groups sprang up, and self-defense classes filled to capacity. Schools organized workshops on personal safety, teaching young people to trust their instincts and to look out for one another. Police officers visited classrooms, reminding students to never walk alone at night, to always let someone know where they were going, to speak up when something felt wrong. Amanda's name was invoked not just in sorrow, but as a call to action, a reminder that every life was precious, and that safety was a responsibility everyone shared. The memory of Savannah Gold and other victims like her echoed in these efforts, their stories braided together with Amanda's. The Harris family kept in touch with families from across the state, sending letters and attending memorials, united by the knowledge that some wounds never fully healed, and that justice was not always a single moment, but a lifelong pursuit. Amanda's case, like Savannah's, became a touchstone for ongoing efforts to improve how missing person cases were handled. Local lawmakers, spurred by the Harris family's advocacy, passed new legislation requiring faster action in the first hours after a disappearance. Police received new training, learning to recognize the warning signs that had once been overlooked. In city council meetings, Linda Harris stood and spoke, her voice trembling but determined, urging officials to remember Amanda, not as a statistic, but as a daughter, a friend, an artist whose dreams were stolen far too soon. Through it all, the candles kept burning, each flame a memory, a promise, a refusal to forget. Amanda's life became more than its tragic end. It became a lesson, a challenge, a legacy. Some wounds can only be healed by the truth, Linda would say, looking out over the sea of faces on the porch. But truth takes all of us. Our courage, our vigilance, our love. As summer returned to Orlando year after year, the Harris family's porch remained aglow. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers drawn by Amanda's story would pause for a moment, letting the gentle light guide them. Children grew up hearing her name, learning not only about danger, but about hope. The hope that comes from refusing to let any story, any life, be forgotten. In the quiet after the vigil, when the last candle had been snuffed out and the porch was empty again, Linda would sit with Mark and their son, looking up at the stars. They found comfort in the silence, knowing that Amanda's light shone on, not only in their hearts, but in every life she had touched. Justice, they knew, was not always a verdict or a headline. Sometimes it was a story told year after year, a lesson repeated, a life remembered with love. And sometimes that was enough. If Amanda's story touched you, don't let it fade. Like and follow, share her memory, and help us keep unfinished stories alive. Because every voice deserves to be heard, and every light deserves to shine.